This is a Hot Pie Original.
Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Inhumane podcast, a Hot Pie Media original. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming back and listening. And for those of you that are watching, I am very excited about today. We have a very special guest to me. Her and I have talked endlessly about all different kinds of things, not just the work we do, but even spiritually. And so she's just one of those gal pals that you just want to have in your life all the time. But her busy schedule and my busy schedule, we just can't hang out every single week. But that might change if I can get her on this podcast a lot more often than she's probably thinking I want. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Cortney Jones of Austin. She is the founder and executive director of Change One. And Change One is a community-based organization that collaborates with local agencies and individuals dedicated to foster care alumni success. And she's going to go in depth about that on this show today. But in addition, because she has a very long, important resume, according to me, is she is a motivational speaker, and she recently or previously used to work for Child Protective Services, CPS, which you've heard me discuss on how much that is a huge demographic for human trafficking as well. She is a member of the Child Welfare Race Equity Collaborative Advisory Committee and the Texas Court Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA's Public Policy and Communications Committee. She's also a former board member of Adoption Knowledge Affiliates and Head Start Child Incorporated, and a former member of the Supreme Court of Texas Children's Commission Foster Care School Discipline Committee. That's a mouthful, but it's so important to have individuals that come from that experience to have a voice in all of these policies that are being made on behalf of children in foster care. Now, she previously served on the National Foster Care Youth and Alumni Policy Council and served as a field instructor with the University of Texas School of Social Work here in Austin, Texas. So Cortney's received a bachelor in social work from Texas AM University Commerce and a master in social work from Texas University. Now, one of the things that's missing on this bio that is new for Cortney, and it's so exciting to have her on this committee, but she actually was appointed by the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott. And I know I wrote it down, Cortney, but I'm probably going to butcher it. So she was, here we are. She was appointed by Governor Abbott to be on the DFPS foster care, or DFPS council, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So excited. You're going to learn lots today, because foster care, aged out youth, some people could say that they are like the forgotten in a lot of ways. And that is a place that these individuals should not be in. Whether because they didn't check a box or because of the age that they are. And Cortney and I are going to discuss in depth about it. So please welcome my friend Cortney.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, she's going to be, a regular. She just doesn't really know it yet. But we'll have her on here. So Cortney, you have such an extensive background.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think I'd like to have you elaborate instead of me is just maybe a couple of minutes explaining why you have such a strong background, and whatever you'd like to share about your time in care, just briefly, so that people know the context of where you're coming from, opposed to anybody else, and why your voice is so important.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for having me. I'm very passionate about the foster care system because I am someone with lived experience. I was in the system for 10 years and I aged out of the foster care system at 18. And when I aged out into homelessness. And, you know, the work that I do now, the advocacy that I do is so that children don't have to go through the same things that I went through and the same things that many of my peers have gone through. And so each and every day, I'm trying to figure out a way in which I can make sure people are more aware about the needs of youth in foster care, why people enter foster care, what happens to them once they leave, and how the community can play a role in that. During my 10 years in foster care, I moved around a lot because foster care is temporary. It's not a permanent situation, but sometimes it ends up being permanent for kids. And that's unfortunate because everyone deserves a loving home. And you know, just a place of refuge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. I mean, the words at least that stuck out to me for sure. And I've heard Cortney's story, you know, a few times. Yet it sounds like the first time each time, because it is so profound. And like the words that stick out is, we need to have awareness and that foster care is not permanent. It's temporary. Like, and that is a huge misconception, right? Yeah. Like we just actually, on our last episode talked about myths and misconceptions of human trafficking. And you and I've talked about the myths and misconceptions of foster care. Yep. And that's a huge reason why we can't prevent a lot of this because of our misconceptions, right? And so that I think is such a huge one on where did this come from that we think foster care is there's permanency? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do you have any idea or?
To be honest, one thing that I have come to the conclusion of probably within the last year is that the entertainment industry, when you look at movies, when you look at TV shows and there's someone that has issues, they always say, oh, they were in foster care. Oh, they were in a group home. And I feel like lots of people watch TV and movies. And that is a message that we have to change because kids that enter the foster care system, they enter it at no fault of their own. Kids that enter foster care is because they've been abused, neglected, or exploited. Yeah. And that is not their fault. And a lot of times what happens with kids in foster care is that they'll have trauma that it has existed because they entered the system, and then they have trauma by being in the system. No one should be in a system. And so they go through their own adolescent development on top of trauma, on top of neglect, on top of exploitation or abuse. And so when they do age out, some, not all, foster youth end up in poor statistics. But we as a community, we have to be more invested in our youth because it'll help later on with making sure that they're successful and self-sufficient if we invest in them now.
Yeah. That I think is one of my favorite quotes that I've heard Cortney say on numerous things when I stalk her in a non-human trafficking way, is that we have to we need to invest more in our youth now, right? Opposed to later. Yeah. Because it's like a snowball, right? Like these issues, like if you thought this child had issues before, let's just say, right, for lack of better terms, and to be just super bold about it, they're just going to snowball. Yeah. Right. And as you mentioned that they already come into the system with trauma based if they were abused, neglected, or exploited, then they're in the system and there's more trauma. Right. And I don't hear any way for them to navigate that. Right. Because there aren't parents there. Even if they do go to a foster care home for a bit or what have you, and they have some foster parents, I don't know how equipped their training is, right, to handle that on an ongoing basis. So we don't have a consistent adult in their life to help them, help guide them as they go through this process. And then adding adolescence and hormones on top of that, right? There's that other big piece that's just natural way of life and growing. But who's helping these kids navigate? Right? It's the big missing piece.
It is the big missing piece. And I also think what contributes to the myths regarding foster care is not only the entertainment industry, but also the fact that people go through things and then they express the things that they go through. And so I think about it as like telephone.
Okay.
You know, you tell one person, then that one person tells another person, then another person. And then by the time it gets to the last person, it's diluted.
Right.
And
it's all jacked up.
It's all jacked up. Yes. And so I think that that's another reason why it's important to spread awareness and to be factual about the things that are going on, because not everyone has a negative experience with the Child Protector Service system. And there are some success stories out there for parents, for children. And so I think when we talk about myths and why people think that foster care may be permanent or they may not know as much about foster care, it's because we're not bringing enough awareness to the community. And so we have to start telling those positive stories of how CPS has helped, or a success story of a kid that has come from the system, in order for those myths to change.
Yeah, very good. Well, there's one sitting right here, right?
Yeah.
And even when I said, hey, Cortney, actually, I want her to be one of my first guests. And when I was explaining it, here to our group, they're like, well, tell me a little bit, about Cortney. And I said, she's the opposite of what is in your brain when you think of someone who has spent time in care. Yeah. Complete. She's beat all these statistics in itself, but can speak too, not because she had this just safe space this whole entire time she was in care, because that is not the case at all whatsoever that you experience. Yet, yes, you experienced homelessness, but you also got out of it, right? Yeah. And hopefully you'll share how that happened on one of these episodes. But where you are today and able to speak to it, and all these committees that I listed that you're on, is people know that they want your voice based off your experience, and you are a true success story. You don't even have to tell it. You know what I mean? Like you literally live it on all the things that you've been doing, so that nobody else experiences any of the things, like you said, that you've experienced. And to me, that's the best almost model, right? Yeah. It's like we're always trying to find a model, especially we know in the foster care world, we're always trying to find a model to follow, right? And a plug and play. Yeah. And in reality, you're living and breathing, and it's right here. Yeah. At least what you described, that's what I see, in you. Yeah. So
thank you for that. I try to be a testament to others and to let them know that there are dark days, but you can most definitely get out of those dark times. Yeah. And it's another foster care alumni, Dr. King. She told me, she said, Cortney, you're not getting these degrees for yourself. You're not doing this work for yourself. You're doing it for your brothers and sisters in care. Wow. And so anytime I feel like stopping, or anytime I feel like giving up, or anytime I feel like, oh, I don't really need to do that, I have to think about what Dr. King said, that I am not doing this for myself, but I'm doing it for them. And I think at the end of the day, not only am I trying to live an example that other young people can follow, I am also trying to help other people, like child welfare professionals, understand that not every kid is going to be a bad statistic, and that you have a part in that. My case manager, when I was 18, I ran away. I was done with CPS. And I hadn't finished high school yet. I was one of those late arrivals to school because of my birthday. And she could have closed my case. She could have been done with me. Her supervisor even encouraged her to close my case and be done, but she didn't. She did not close my case. She did not turn her back on me. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And because of that, I was able to come back into foster care. She was able to find me a placement that I felt comfortable in. And I was able to finish out high school. And you know, it was because of her I was able to get my tuition fee waiver and go to college, because I would have missed out on all of those benefits that I could have received from the state if she would have washed her hands and been done with me.
And that's how long was she? Was she with you the whole time? Was she your only case manager?
She was not my only case manager. Okay. No,
she was the last.
She was my last case manager. Okay. I've gone through many case managers in the system because it's a revolving door. Right. And that's like another awareness piece is how can we retain good employees and how can we keep them in a child's life? Because transition is hard. It's hard for anybody.
It's hard for adults.
Yes. And just imagine like being at work and every 6 months you get a new supervisor and you have to acclimate to that new supervisor's rules and expectations and it's hard. And that's what a kid in foster care has to go through is that they go to a new foster home. They have to follow those rules, maybe change traditions, maybe, you know, it's being exposed to things that they're not used to being exposed to. And then they have a new case manager on top of that, then a new teacher on top of that. Like transition is so hard for the average person. So just imagine what they're going through.
Yeah. And kids, I mean, you know, when I was obviously a teacher in the classroom, if you remember, and consistency. When there was no consistency, like, for example, I remember when my grandfather on my dad's side passed away, and my grandfather grew up with us, like he lived with us for a good portion of my life. So we took quite a few days off. Obviously, when he passed away, not just for services, but for more time. When I came back to my classroom, my kids were all over the place. Because lack of consistency. And that was just only for a few days. So when this becomes your life, it's so easy to label them as like you were mentioning, right? The troubled child or he has issues or she has issues opposed to what's happening in the environment. And it's the adults that control the environment.
Correct.
Yet let's always blame the kid.
Right? It's like, unfortunate.
Totally. But that is what we do. And that's, like you said, I mean, really bursting those misconceptions and for us to take off the lens that we have, because the experiences do come from pop culture and media and news and all of these things. Like that's our experience if we've never been in it before, right? And we're making judgment calls and changing policies and things like that based off of those. So we're in my world and your world, which totally intersect. We're constantly having to bust those myths and to get down to the real problem and helping the adults just look from a different lens all the time, though. Not once in a while, but all the time, right?
Children in foster care are just like any other child. They want to be loved. They want attention. They want to be nurtured. They want to feel important. They want their voice to be heard. They're just like their peers.
Totally.
It's
and when you say it like that, right? It's so simple. And I really believe that life really is simple, no matter the circumstance. It's people that make it difficult, right? Because we come in with our biases and things of that nature. And it's hard for us to just make that switch, even if it's tiny in the beginning, to understand the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is this is a child, regardless if they're a preteen or a teen, they're still under the age of 18, right? And they need guidance. And they need that love and that nourishment. They yearn for those things, no matter how tough they are. Actually, I always think the tougher ones are the ones that yearn for it more. Because they're doing some things to really get your attention. Yet, I'm like, that's the one that needs the biggest hug or praise or what have you, right? And I saw it all day long in my, in my classroom when districts sometimes would come down and say, oh my gosh, this person's scores have gone down. I'm like, well, yeah, they've gone down. He keeps staring at the phone because his mom is going to court today, and so he keeps staring at the phone and wondering if he's going to hear, is my mom going to be back home or is she going to jail, right? Like, to him, that is more important. And I'm going to allow that because that's what he needs, right? As well as on Fridays, you think most kids would be super excited because it's Friday, it's the weekend. Well, those who may be home alone for the weekend and not have as much food, they're the ones going to be very worried on Friday. And their anxiety is up and they're like, oh my gosh, Miss V, right? She's not going to be here. I'm not going to get all these snacks and there's no food in the cafeteria and all these things. So again, right? It's those simple needs that put these kids into a state that looks like they have problems, but in reality, we're just not meeting their needs.
Yeah.
Right? That's simple. Man, this should have been like our closing, but but I'm so glad at least that I think the audience is getting a bigger picture of really who you are and some of the things that you experience and why you have such a strong voice in your bio. You're in all these committees and you've been asked. And I remember when I called you and I was telling you about the podcast and you were telling me about this appointment that Governor Abbott made or appointed you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I try not to scream so I don't hurt people's ears on the phone, but I was like, Cortney, this is such a huge, like, oh my gosh, accomplishment that you weren't even looking for.
I was not. When I got that call, I was like, who? I was like, what?
Crank caller. Is this a crank caller?
And then because I missed the call, and then when I called it back, it said the governor's office. And I was like, who's calling me from the governor's office? And I was just like, once I got the call and they said someone had recommended me, I was like, who recommended? They were like, do you know her? I'm like, no, but
really?
Yeah,
I think I missed that part.
And I was like, wow, like it's mind blowing. I think that God blows my mind each and every day because, someone being in the foster care system, going to 25 different placements, to exiting into homelessness, and then being able to move to Austin and work for the state, that was mind blowing for me. And I thought that's what God had for me. And that was the end all be all.
Yeah.
And so he keeps amazing me about the depth in which he wants me to reach his people. And so this is an honor to be on the DFPS council. And for those that don't know what DFPS is, that is the Department of Family and Protective Services. And Adult Protective Services is under there. Child Protective Services is under there. It's like an umbrella. And so me sitting on this council will allow me to be able to challenge and hold people accountable to our children, youth, and families.
Yeah.
And that is so powerful. I never thought little old me.
Right.
That I would have that opportunity and that someone would entrust in me to be a voice for the voiceless. And it is such an honor to be able to be in that role.
Well, it couldn't have happened to really a better individual. Now, what I'd like you, if you don't mind, can you explain, so this council, how many are there? And if you go a little in depth of what is it that you do? Like I heard the word, responsibility and accountability. So can you explain how many are on there and really, what is it that y'all are do? What is the purpose?
So there are people that are on the council, and it's basically on different spectrums. Some people are from the health profession. Some people are from like social work professions. Some people have been very invested in adult behavioral health. Some people are invested in policy. So each person has been appointed to this council for various reasons.
Gotcha.
And so what we do on the council is ask tough questions.
Okay.
About certain things that are going on in each one of the systems. And of course, the system that I'm very passionate about is child welfare.
Right.
So I'm asking a lot of tough questions. What are we doing to prepare our young people of color for the real world?
Sure.
because of our landscape and everything that's going on. And so when I'm asking those tough questions, if they hadn't thought about it, haven't started putting stuff in motion, you know, those are the type of things that, you know, I am trying to address through the council. Is like, you know, what are we doing as far as prevention? You know, the Family First Act just came out. You know, did Texas opt in? What is Texas' plan for Family First? You know, and that's a prevention effort. And so, you know, I focus on different topics that are currently happening.
Okay.
And trying to figure out where are we currently at, where are the gaps, and where can we do better? And what can we continue to keep doing that that is working right? And it's really about, you know, being informed so that we can support the commissioner in the direction that she's going with the agency. Just being an expert. That's what my role is to be an expert and to be a support.
Gotcha. I love the fact that you're saying you're there to ask questions. And I think you know, to some people listening, they may think like, oh, well, I can do that, ask questions. But when you're in the space that Cortney and I have been in, a lot of times asking questions is not very popular, actually. They've been doing things for a really long time. And, oh, we already tried that. We've done that before and it didn't work. There's so much pushback because there is bureaucracy, right? It is a state agency. And this is all state agencies. It's not just DFPS, right? But so asking those questions and having this kind of counsel, it sounds like everyone knows you're going to get pushback, but it's more for the accountability and responsibility part, because we know that if we fail one child, we're failing, right? Granted, yes, of course, the success stories, we definitely want to hear them, but we should not fail one child on any agency, right? This isn't just DFPS, it's all across the board, right? Like one child. We are the responsible individuals as the adults, right? And technically the community as well. And that's one of the things I think, you know, you and I have talked about, you know, quite a few different times, but also to the audience of Inhumane, I'm saying, you know, it's your job as the community. These are your kids, because if we're under the impression that, well, this is not my problem. Those are from that side of town, or my kids will never interact with those individuals or what have you. We know that is, you're honestly delusional because we're all part of the same community. We will either, even just from the economic standpoint, right? So if these individuals come out of care and we didn't do the prevention like you were talking about, and we didn't invest, then we're going to pay for it later. Yeah,
we're going to pay for it later, because when we're not teaching young people about values and character, and we're not helping them regulate their social emotional feelings, and when we're not teaching them about how to cook or how to clean or, you know, just the basics in life, and then they go into the real world and they don't know these things, then they will potentially fall into negative outcomes. And then who pays for negative outcomes? Who pays for the prison system? Who pays for food stamps? Who pays for all of these things? Our tax dollars. And so if we, you know, invest in prevention or invest in youth today, then we can have, you know, young adults that are paying taxes themselves, and contributing to society themselves. And so, yes, we're gonna be involved one way or another on the front end or the back end.
Correct. And that's what I think when it comes to awareness, right? So, I mean, so one, foster care, that's not a new word, right? That word's been around for a long time. Abuse, neglect, all that. People know those words. They know what it means. Whatever misconceptions they have, they still know exists. So I'll circle over here to human trafficking. We have a lot of individuals that believe that doesn't exist because they don't know, right? And what they don't know is what they don't know. So, so when I'm talking to someone about it and they're like, well, I feel it's a choice, of them to be trafficked.
Yeah.
And, I've said this many times. I'm like, I know every little girl grows up and says, I want to be a prostitute. I want to be a stripper. Like we hear it all day long.
Yeah.
Not ever.
Yeah.
Not ever. Never have you heard your girlfriend ever say that when y'all were playing together or what have you.
Yeah.
So when I bring this up and if an individual has that mindset and I'm not there to combat and completely change it, I know I could always go to the economical standpoint of things, right? And say, okay, so would you believe that you're going to have to pay for recovery? Right. And what that is worth, how many billions of dollars that is for individuals who are trafficked. And then they stay addicted to drugs. They can't sustain themselves. So housing is no longer temporary. It is permanent because they are just not sustainable. Right.
Yeah.
We have not. So it's either the easiest. I think the best picture you say is either you pay for it on the front end or you pay for it on the back end. And then that kind of changes, those individuals are like, oh, okay, maybe this is a real thing. Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're talking to people, you have to talk to them at where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't expect you, or I'm not going to just pull you because pulling you is going to take way more energy for me.
Yeah.
And you're probably not, you're going to be reluctant and fight me on it, opposed to just let me meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
Tell you about foster care, where we're going with this, what the problems are.
Yeah.
And it's so that you can understand.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that part, that you're able to do and kind of simplify that.
The one thing that I really admired by working in DC, I had the pleasure before Senator Orrin Hatch left to be able to intern under him. And I realized that children are a nonpartisan issue. Regardless of the left or the right, children are a nonpartisan issue. And so our community needs to look at it that way as well.
Totally.
Our children are our future. And I know that people say it and it can be cliche, but it is not.
Right.
It is not. Our children, basically they're going to be the ones that are going to be in the health profession or the IT profession or, all of these different professions that we're going to need for society to operate.
Right.
And so if we're not investing in them now, then how is our society going to look later?
Yeah. How it could either be fractured, right? Or it can prosper.
Yeah.
And this is where having those conversations when we're bringing up awareness is, I think the community is just not aware of that, right?
Yeah.
Aware of how much they can partake to create that future.
Yeah.
Instead, it's the government's problem. Sorry, it's our problem.
Yeah. And I know some people may think about, well, that's not my child or that's not my problem, those type of things. But what they fail to realize is that there are 400,000 children in the foster care system in the United States. 400,000. And in the state of Texas, we have over 123,000 kids in the foster care system.
Yeah.
So that means that it's close to us more than we think.
Absolutely.
We could be sitting in a doctor's office and don't know that that person is currently in foster care or have experienced the foster care system or adoption. We just don't know because foster care is not written on people's head. Adoption is not written on people's head, but the numbers and the data doesn't lie.
Yeah, for sure.
So it hits our community more than we think.
And, and that's I was joking on our last episode. Well, I was being facetious, actually. I was saying because of these past, at least 2020 and now going into 2021, everyone has become like a political science major overnight, right? Like we all, oh, now I understand this bill and now I'm reading these bills and now I'm reading this data and so on and so forth, right? But that's what I keep saying is when it comes to human trafficking and foster care, that data does not lie. And I know with human trafficking, it's very much underreported because most people do not self-identify as being a victim of trafficking, right? And in the foster care system, I too think some of that data is underreported, especially when we go into like runaways and things of that nature, right? Which runaways a huge target for traffickers or for predators across the board, right? And that data is not coming in. It is so far behind, right? We don't even know where that is.
Yeah.
So before we get like really even further, because I just love where this conversation is going, of course.
Yeah.
I actually would like you to share with our audience is how many, right? And actually, if you could pull up the first slide, and that first slide has the stats that you gave us, Cortney, about the 29,000, right, in foster care. Can you just quickly explain the process of someone going into care? And again, we know it's not all black and white, right? It looks different, but just overall in general.
Yes. So again, like I said earlier, a kid will enter foster care because there's some type of abuse, neglect, or exploitation going on. Typically what happens is the individual can call in a report, or they can go online and make a report. And those are the two main ways that most people will try to, I guess, flag down the system to say, hey, this family is in need of help, or this is what's going on with the family. Then we have the intake department that will look at the severity of what has been brought to their attention. And then they'll have someone respond and to follow up within 24 to 48 hours. And from that response, depending on the situation, because every situation is different, there may or may not be an investigator assigned to the case. But if there is an investigator assigned to the case, the investigator will look into whatever the allegations were and either rule it out, or they will, proceed with making sure that the safety and well-being of that child is looked at first and foremost. And so if a removal has to happen, what they will do is try and see if there's a family member that child can go to. I know some of the misconceptions is that CPS is trying to take people's kids away. And there has been a lot of work where they are trying to do things differently. And so it is important for family members not to turn a blind eye. It's important for family members to open up their home if they can, because that's what CPS is going to do. They're going to try and see, keeping that child intact with their family. If that is not an option, then the child will come into foster care. And when the child comes into foster care, there may or may not be a foster home available. We have a shortage of foster parents. And so what happens is that a child may go into an emergency children's shelter. So just imagine being at home with your mom, your dad, and then being ripped from your family and not going to another family, but going to a shelter. And just imagine someone that's 8, 5, 6 years old having to go through that, and even a teenager having to go through that. But if there is a home available, they will go into a foster home. If there is not a foster home or a shelter available, they have things called group homes. And so group homes is where several children are living in a home. It will be anywhere between 2 to 6 kids in a home. And, CPS has done a great job with trying to reduce the number of kids that are in group homes. And for kids that it may not work out for them in a foster home, a shelter, or a group home, and they may need extra support and services because of the trauma that has existed, they have residential treatment centers where kids can go. So there are a lot of different avenues in which that kid could go into. But again, like I said earlier, it's supposed to be a temporary situation, and it's so that CPS can can provide supports and services to the family for whatever the removal was for. If it was not like a threat or an endangerment to the child, CPS main goal is to provide that family with resources and making sure, like, if it was a housing situation or if it was food instability or if it was just, lack of parenting skills, they are going to work with that parent. And that parent has a right to be able to work on those services to get their child back. And so there is a time frame in which they give the parents to work on those things. And so the hope for everyone is reunification, that the child can reunify with their biological parents. And so if that does not happen and the parent was not able to be healthy enough to take their child back, then the next option is adoption. And so a lot of times people do not know adoption from foster care as an option. Most people know about private adoption, but they don't know about adoption from the foster care system. And so what happens to children is that because foster care is temporary, they move from group homes to shelters to foster homes. And then if they don't get connected to a caring adult for adoption, then they age out of the system. Yeah. And when they age out of the system, that's where we have those negative statistics of incarceration, early pregnancy, those type of things. And so it's really, really important that we bring more awareness to the needs of foster parents, bring more awareness to the needs of more people working, in this community, as in the shelters or in the group homes. And I know working with children is not everyone's forte, but, for those that do care about the children and feel like that they can provide something, they should. And, foster care is not just about fostering and adopting. Like, people can play a role by either becoming a CASA volunteer, and that's a court-appointed special advocate, where they can go and learn about the court system and be able to advocate for that child and their permanency option. So permanency is basically, where is this kid going to go with their life? Are they going to go back home? Are they going to, be adopted? Are they going to, be reunified with a sibling, so that person is a mentor. It's a person that really is looking at the best interests of the child and not anyone else but the child. So that's another thing that people can do is if they don't feel like they have the capacity to foster or adopt. And then also people can become a respite care provider. And so a respite care provider is just like a babysitter. Someone to fill in, to give that foster parent a break, like if they, need to take care of things or go on vacation or, whatever the case may be. It's a respite care provider is something that's very short term on an as-need basis, not a big commitment. But I can most definitely say that my respite care provider, she came into our house every Tuesday and Thursday. And I connected with her so much to the point that I begged my CPS case manager to allow me to start going to spend the weekends with her and her family. And they were literally they were a breath of fresh air for me. Sure. They provided me some normalcy, and they were, still my family after CPS. And she just played a little role on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I just connected to her, and I'm happy that she connected to me and allowed me to be a part of her family's life.
Yeah. Well, see, and I love that and that's one of the things with any of these, social issues is, yes, they're complex, because it has to deal with people. And we are complex creatures. We just are, right? And so we want to put everyone in a box and do this one size fits all. And if it doesn't fit that way, we can't easily define it. And if we can't easily define it, then there's all these reasons of why we can't help, because we're like, this problem is just so huge and I just don't have the capacity or the know-how, or I'm not an expert in this area, right? All of these reasons, which are totally justified. Yeah. But I think with the awareness that we're trying to bring is like that term, right? How do you eat an elephant? One slice at a time, right? One slice at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So with these issues, it's literally one slice at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the respite because it's like you said, there's a set schedule, or it's once in a while, not on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but less than that.
Yeah.
But it's something.
Yeah.
And that little something actually can mean the absolute world to a child in care, right?
Yep.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I love that you gave that example, because that is like something, like I said, so it could be a small role for you as an adult that you can handle and put into your life.
Mm-hmm.
But for that kid, that could be the biggest thing ever when they see you, right? And they're talking about you years later and saying that person was so great, right? Because they don't have a lot of great people in their life because they already have their walls up, right? So for someone to able to break through and they're able to be vulnerable and connect like that.
Yep.
That's what these kids need.
Yeah. When I would run away, she would be the first person I called.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call anyone else but her. And I'm like, this is what happened. And blah, blah, blah. And she was like, Cortney, you got to go back. And I'm like, no. But
she was listening. She was there to listen.
She was there to listen, not to judge me, not to tell me what to do. She was there as a support and helped me to like really like think through the situation. And there was a level of trust that was built.
That's the key.
Trust is the key. Like if I don't know you, you don't know me, and no rapport or trust is built, then I don't know how I'm going to be able to listen to what you have to say. I may listen, but it doesn't mean I'm probably going to do what you say.
Yeah.
But that was my mentality when I was younger and a child.
Yeah. And see, in foster care, right, there is no recidivism, because you have no choice but to go back, because you are under the age of 18. Unlike in human trafficking, the recidivism, it takes a victim of human trafficking 7 times to get out of the life. And everyone, or not everyone, majority of people stare at me and they're like, why? Well, because there's no trust, right? Just because we're telling someone that's not good for you. How many of us have really a girlfriend where you're like, man, I have told her to stop dating that person or person that is just like the last person, yet she keeps doing it, right? We all, and that's an adult. So we've all know somebody that keeps doing something that's not good for them, right?
Yeah.
Regardless if we're saying, well, that's a boyfriend and this is someone being trafficked, right? There is trust. There is the lack of vulnerability as well, right? There's a variety of reasons. But the thing is, with foster care, kids in care, they have no choice but to go back. Unless they're a runaway and you can't find them, right? There's a huge difference.
And I want to really touch on that point of human trafficking and foster youth and how it kind of correlates. When a child runs away from foster care and they are approached, by a pimp, or because what they do is they know that this child is a child.
Right.
They know that they've come from a broken home, a broken system, and that they've left for a reason. And most of the time, kids, they're tired of being told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And this person is like, you don't have to do anything. They make it seem like that, that you don't have to do anything. Everything that you do is a choice. And they make you feel comfortable, and they give you all of these things that you never really had before. And then you're hooked in at that point.
Right.
And what happens is, if CPS finds me again, I come back in. And then what they do is they recruit other girls from the group homes and the shelters and say, hey, I ran away and I met this guy, or I met this girl, and like this is everything, everything to me. Like I can go to bed when I want to. I can, choices. That's what they look at it as, but they're not understanding that they're being groomed.
Totally right.
They're not understanding that the things that they think is a choice is not a choice.
Yeah,
it's manipulation. And just to think adults that are being manipulated, like it's real. So just think about kids that have not developmentally grown to its full capacity being manipulated.
Right.
And so it kind of creates this chain effect of more and more kids going into possible human trafficking. And like you said, the sad thing to me is that when a kid from foster care runs away, who's looking for them?
Right.
Who's looking for them? Who's advocating for them? When a kid runs away from a parent, that parent is calling the police. They're calling their friends and families to do searching. They're getting posters out. They're doing all of these things. Yeah. And I'm not saying that Child Protective Services is not doing that. They are. They're doing it. But there's a capacity in which they can do that.
Right. Yeah.
And so...
Well, there is someone looking for them. It's the trafficker. Right?
That is true.
They're the only individuals, majority of the time, that are looking for that runaway from foster care. Because that is the ideal, how much money they can make, because it is a adolescent or preteen or teenager, right? All the way up until past the year of 18, turning 18. So that individual is going to make them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they know no one is making posters. No one is, like you said, calling all these family and friends. Nobody is posting on Facebook and trying to make it go viral. Because of lack of capacity, because they're in care. So nobody's doing that. So this is like the easiest money that they can make. Right. So that's the one person that's looking for them, sadly.
And, I know that legislation has been put in where, the department is, making reports of missing kids. And I know that they have investigators that are trying to look for kids that are missing. And I know that they're trying to work with NCMEC. But again, looking at the number of kids that are in the system.
Oh, yeah. For
and looking at the number of people that are employed to tackle this, it's not enough.
No. Well, see, and that's, the famous or the phrase that you hear a lot, right, in trafficking is, right, hiding in plain sight, right? They're hiding right here. They're right in front of you. You just passed them when you went to go grab your soda at the convenience store and they were there with their trafficker, right? So you're passing them all the time. And we'll just talk about sex, not even labor at the moment, because most of these kids from care, most of them are sexually exploited opposed to labor and a combination, right? So something, that you shared is about the numbers do not match at all whatsoever. So we have an enormous amount of kids in care and then the workers, social workers or whatever their title is. And it's completely unbalanced.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we're sharing with our audience here at the Inhumane podcast is these victims of human trafficking are across the realm. Kids that are homeless, LGBTQ, kids in care, right? Like we could go on and show all of the intersections. However, the reason why we need more people to eradicate human trafficking in whatever capacity, which is equivalent really to kids in care, is because we are all outnumbered right now. There are more predators, more traffickers than there are individuals who have the awareness, just for starters, right? Because we're unaware of the global slave trade that's happening right now. We're unaware of the foster care problem. We're just unaware. So we know that that's the first vital step, but it's mainly because I think if the community understood on how outnumbered we are and not just automatically point and blame and say, oh my gosh, this was y'all's job. Yes, it's true. But we also need the community out there looking. Yeah. And I didn't get degrees in social work, right? And we know in this space, social workers have a lot of say and a lot of power. And sometimes we don't play nice with others, right? As we know, there's a lot of silos, right, in these groups. And so at least back in the day, I know I had a lot of doors slammed in my face because it was very much of like, oh, well, you can't talk to a victim of human trafficking. You can't do this. You're not a social worker, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started to build my own table, right? And invite my own people. Because to me, you can't turn away people when we're outnumbered, right? Just that sheer fact alone. Now, of course, we need to get people trained. We need people, trauma informed. We need people, to make sure that we're doing checks and these people are not sexual predators themselves, right? And be accountable that way. 100%. We need to do all that. But my point is, you can't tell me because you're a construction worker, I'm not going to invite you to the table. No, you're out there. I need you at the table. Because you're a trucker, you're not invited to the table because you have no experience. No, I need you at the table. Right? You're so the important. Eyes. You're the eyes and the ears. It's almost like you're in the trenches as well. Just because you may not be a caseworker, just for the example of foster care, just because you're not a caseworker doesn't mean you're not in the trenches. You're out there seeing and reporting things that I'm unable, right, to see as a caseworker. So I say all that because we're so outnumbered. And this is where the community needs to understand we're going to continue to be outnumbered. And we're going to continue to be making policies from way back here and making change from way back here until finally at least getting almost neck and neck with them, right? And taking our kids back because that's what they're doing, right? And there's more and more and more of them. And I do believe a lot of individuals, it's because they really just don't know. I think there are more good than there are bad individuals. We're just in our own bubble. We take care of our own. And going back to the misconception, well, these aren't my kids, right? So we take care of our own and not realizing that our own are going to be affected by all of these issues, right? And we're handing them, we can either hand them like a key to the kingdom or we can hand them a key to a dumpster or, this crazy fractured community. And I know for me, I'd rather the first. I want to give them keys to the kingdom, right? And they can make it even better, opposed to giving them something that's so jacked up when I knew I could have done something about it, right? Okay, so Cortney, we're going to just shift right back to this first slide that you gave us. And the numbers show that there's 29,927 children in foster care as of 2019, because, right, 2020 is going to come out soon. Now, you also have that there's 3,378 waiting for adoptive families. So what's happening with the rest of that number? Because that's a huge number, right? It's a very, very small piece. So what's happening with the rest of those kids that are not on the waiting list, I guess, for adoptive families?
So for those that are not on the adoption list, those are the ones that, Child Protective Services is trying to reunify them with their family. Trying to find, other family members that can take them in. Or the other thing is those are the ones that are lingering in the system.
So they're all basically not being adopted for these variety of reasons. Trying to reunite or trying to find family, or maybe parents already have given up their rights but they're not going to be adopted and they're more likely going to age out.
Correct.
Could we say that? Okay. Okay. That's a big number. Big number, especially regarding to the difference, right? And so that's kind of where we're saying is, okay, so just for the audience purpose, so basically the remaining of this from the 29,000, right? And remove 3,300 because they're going to be adopted. The rest of those children are, if they age out of the system, they're more likely going to be trafficked. So there's about, I believe the stat right now is 60% of trafficking victims are children. And out of that 60, I believe it's 50 that are actually going to be trafficked from the foster care system. And so we'll double check on those stats and then put them up for y'all for sure. But I want to make that clear is that's why we need your that's why we need help, right?
Yeah.
That's why we need awareness. But then to meet you where you are and what's going on in your life, where is it that you can help? Because we just showed you how they intersect, right? So if we don't solve this foster care problem, these kids are more likely going to be trafficked. So I'll tell you what will happen, because we have those statistics. So they're either going to be homeless, they're going to go to prison, they're going to, you mentioned like pregnant under the age of 21, right? What else am I missing?
Health disparities.
Okay, explain that one a little bit, if you don't mind.
They will have health disparities. Most individuals that have parents, they can be on their parents' insurance until the age of 26. And so for those that are transitioning out of foster care, if they're eligible, they could get Medicaid. But for those that are not eligible, they're not going to get Medicaid. And so there are some health disparities in learning how to navigate the health system, learning how to, learning how to, continue medication that maybe you were getting while you were in care, or maybe dealing with some type of mental health disorder, or, maybe dealing with past trauma and trying to stay stable, and not necessarily a mental health disorder, but just, depression or anxiety. And we all know that that all plays into our overall health. And for those that may not know, there's an overrepresentation of children of color in foster care. It's not because their parents abuse or neglect them any more than any other race. That just means that, there is some type of biases and judgments and things that need to be addressed, and the system has been working on addressing them. But when we think about the number of children in color in foster care, and we think about health disparities of people of color, then it's like a triple thing with them when they're exiting the system, because of the fact that, one, they don't have a caring adult to help them navigate the real world, nor their health. And keeping up with that. And so we have to kind of think about those things when I talk about health disparities, just the things that already come with being a person of color. Yeah.
Well, and really all the things, right, that we just mentioned, that the statistics show of when kids age out of foster care, what majority of them will experience, right? If not one, maybe two or three or four or five, right? Is that they can't do it, like you said, alone. And we need more guidance for them. And really, all of these are basic needs. These are all basic needs. And when you don't have basic needs, that's how they fall into the hands of these predators.
Yep. Survival.
It goes into survival. You're absolutely right. Now, I mean, I've been in part of tons of conversations where, people say, oh, but I still wouldn't do A, B, C, and D. I still wouldn't do this, or I still didn't do that. One, if they've never experienced it, it's really obviously hard to say that, because we believe that a lot of these individuals have a choice. Like, it always comes down to choice. Yes, could they say no? But what I think most people don't understand is they don't realize that they're being trafficked, period. They just don't realize that. So we may say that we would do A, B, C, and D, but in reality, we just don't know that someone is actually manipulating us so that we can't have food because we're hungry. So that we can't have shelter because we have no place to go. Because all of these things, right, on and on and on. And even healthcare. Like, oh my gosh, I'm sick. Well, I could pay for that medical bill. And we think this is a nice, kind person, which maybe I haven't received that my whole time in care. And lo and behold, they want something for that. There will be an exchange, and it's not going to be an exchange that someone wants to freely give up, right? Because you're really then treated no longer like a human. And you now become property or commodity, period. And so we just don't realize that when we come out of care, or we're still in care, right? And run away for a bit or what have you. We just don't realize it.
And to kind of bring it back to the community and how it kind of could relate to the community is that earlier I said children enter the foster care system because of abuse or neglect or exploitation. Well, a form of abuse is sexual abuse.
Right.
And not every person that has been sexually abused enters the foster care system. So there are people in our community that have been through that, that have not been able to heal from that. And even those that were removed and put in foster care, they're still processing that. You know, like if a person was supposed to love me and take care of me, but they also violated me, what does that mean? And as an adolescent, you know, people go through like hormones and they go through, you know, puberty and they go through all of these things and they're trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
And one thing I kind of think about when people say, oh, well, you have a choice in the matter. Well, anyone that has been violated, there is going to be a lot of self-doubt. There's going to be maybe some self-confidence issues. There's probably going to be some self-esteem issues. They're gonna be some internal struggles that go on. And I think as a woman in general, or even a man, like there are always going to be internal struggles. But I think for those that are as vulnerable as youth in the foster care system, they're like times 10. You know, it's like, okay, I was molested and I'm in foster care. Now I'm confused about what does love really mean. And then I have this person telling me that they love me and they're asking me to do this. And, you know, okay, well, that's another message, a mixed message of what love really means. And so it's like it continues this. And so when we think about human trafficking, when we think about how a person could just say no, it's like it's grooming. It's already been groomed. And like we all do things out of desperation or not feeling confident or lack of confidence or whatever the case may be. And I'm going to share something personal. And I think it's important to speak your truth. And I never really spoke my truth about this because I felt like I would be judged. But again, I live life on my own terms. I walk to the beat of my own drum. And I know that God is using me to help someone else.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yes. And so what I know from my situation of going through the foster care system and then going into the real world is I had no one explaining to me self-worth. I had no one explaining to me how to love myself. And so I took whatever was given to me. And I had a mixed message about what love was. And I found love in all the wrong places. And I had to go through tough times as a young adult. And I remember this woman telling me how beautiful I was. And I was like, oh, thank you. You know, being young, being like 18, 19 years old. And she was just so nice to me. And me being naive and silly, she introduced me to her friend and, you know, we were just talking and walking around the store. And then we exchanged numbers and they were like, oh, we should hang out. And I'm like, yeah. And as I continued to, you know, hang out with them throughout the day, little did I know, I was being groomed. And in the back of my mind, when I was approached about selling my body, I didn't think anything was wrong with it at the time. And the reason why I didn't think anything was wrong, because she was like, you already have sex already. And I already knew in my mind, me sharing myself with someone was not getting me the result of that, what I thought I was going to get, you know, love, a relationship, these type of things. So she was like, might as well make money for it.
normalizing it.
She normalized it.
Normalized
and I was
it.
like, yeah, I am already having sex with people. And yeah, you know, why not make money? And it's not like I was making a lot of money as it is to survive. So it made sense. I was like, okay, all right. And then I got some common sense. Thank you.
Kicked in the high gear.
Yes, I got some common sense. And the only reason why I got some common sense is because I ran into trouble right when I got out of foster care. I ended up incarcerated, just like the statistics. I'm no different than any other child that emancipates out of the foster care system. It's just I was given a second chance in life, and I took that second chance, and I ran, and I did nothing to get in trouble anymore after that. So when I was approached about, you know, selling my body, she told me, she said, yeah, if you get caught and get in jail, he'll get us out. And I said, oh, no. I'm not going back to jail. I was like, never will I do that. Never. That's not the life that I want to live. And that's when I changed the trajectory of my life.
Right.
But I was one thought away from not, you know, not changing my life and going down a path that I thought was okay.
Yeah.
But it's not okay. And it's because I didn't know my self-worth. I didn't know what self-love is. I didn't have someone telling me growing up, you were beautiful. And telling me in a way that wasn't infringing upon, you know, boundaries. Because even being in shelters, you know, I was approached by people in shelters, and I didn't think anything was wrong with it because, you know, I felt like, oh, I'm getting special treatment. Oh, I'm getting more of a snack, or, oh, I get to stay up longer, not knowing that this is a grown man and he has no business with a 13-year-old. But as an adult, I understand it now. And I understand how wrong that was. But so when the community talks about how can a person say yes, or how can a person can't turn away from it, it's like you're in it before you even know it sometimes.
Yeah. And I love how simple you made it. I was a thought away. Like, that's how quick, that's how simple that these individuals make it. And I always compare it really to, like, you know, in the US, right, in the 80s, there was such a huge gang problem, right? And a big focus was on gangs and on drugs, right? It was a big social issue in the US. And the conversation was like, why are these gangs getting so big? Well, guess who did they prey upon? They preyed upon kids in the foster care system, kids who their parents were never home, right? Because what did these kids need? They wanted that connection.
We'll be your family.
They wanted that family, right? And the praise they weren't getting at home, they were getting there. This became their family. They literally would die for these gangs, right? Like, die for them, put their life on the line. No problem, no qualm about it. The loyalty was huge. So I make that connection so much to human trafficking because you see it. You see literally the parallels, right? Like, it is so much aligned with that because like you just stated, here's a girl super nice to me. Someone hasn't been nice to me in forever, and to receive nothing get nothing in return at the moment, praising me. We're just having a good time. We're being us, you know, nothing about it. And then she's doing me a solid. She's giving me like, hey, here's some things that you can do to have a better life because right now you're hungry. You have no place to live. So on and so go on and on, right? The long list. So I'm here to help you. And I don't need anything in return because it's really not me. You're going to give it to him and he'll protect us. He's going to protect us. And you are literally a thought away.
I was a thought away.
And it's only because, like you said, you just experienced being incarcerated. Where you're like, oh, no. Oh, I didn't know that was part of the deal.
Yeah.
That's part of the deal. That's a deal breaker. I'm not going back, right?
Yeah.
And so there was that switch for you because of something you just experienced. And obviously, like, because I know you're a believer, you're like, God had a hand on me and I had that second chance and I'm just going to bolt.
Yes.
So you're like, oh, thanks so much. But for others,
they don't learn their lesson sometimes.
right?
I learned my lesson.
It takes a lot longer for some of us, right, to learn things. But unfortunately, when they can be trapped and not get out of that, and then that is their life. Because what starts to happen because she normalized sex, right?
Yeah,
and that happens so often, as well as part of the community. Our community is like, well, they chose to have sex, and what I tried to explain last time is, things may look like a business partnership. So there's a transaction. I give you this, you give me that. But once that partnership or one side of the partnership starts to infringe on the freedom and choices of the other, it's no longer a partnership, right? So there's no longer a business transaction. If you want to look at it that black and white, right? So I no longer have a choice if you're forcing me or coercing me, which and being fraudulent, right? And manipulation is a part of those three.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the physical. It is totally the psychological.
It is.
And kids in care, all the trauma already that they've been through, psychologically, they want someone that is going to give them that safety and that praise. And initially, that's what it looks like they're getting until they're there. And then there's no way out.
Yeah.
And then the shame kicks in, right? And the guilt kicks in. And then they never really leave because of that shame and guilt.
Yeah. And then where are they going to go? Who are they going to turn to?
Yeah.
Especially if you aged out and you have no caring adult. Where are you going to go?
Yeah. And a lot of these shelters, right? Very similar. It's short term. So that's awesome. You gave me a bed to sleep in for 72 hours or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. But now where do I go? It goes back to the same question. Those needs are not being met, right? So the recidivism just skyrockets and we can't break that barrier, which, oh my gosh, I wish we could break that barrier, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure some of you noticed Cortney and I, we changed cups. So obviously we took a quick little break. Her and I are going to talk about so many other things. And there's going to be many parts to this because foster care, kids in care are a huge demographic for these traffickers. And they're put into the system. It's our job to take care of them while they're in the system, as well as when they get out. And we're outnumbered. So we're not doing a great job because we're outnumbered. We're doing good things and doing the best that they can from all realms, right? From all realms. But we know we're outnumbered. And if you're outnumbered, we're always going to be just behind.
Yeah.
Okay. So her and I are going to talk again. Like I said, she is coming back multiple times. But what I'd like to transition into is her organization, Change One.
Yes.
And why I wanted again you to be one of our first guests is because not only the great work that you've been doing with Change One, but if you weren't there, if Change One was not there for some of these kids who have aged out, the worst crimes would be happening to these individuals. They would be homeless. They would be hungry. All these things, which again is a direct correlation to being trafficked. Yeah. And we cannot have these individuals be enslaved at all whatsoever. It is 2021. And yet I'm like, how did we not get our stuff together? Right? Abe Lincoln signed that such a long time ago, and we're still having to deal with slavery today. Right? It just looks different. And unfortunately, they're amongst us. That's, I think, the huge difference on why we can't identify it compared to before, right? Right now, like you said, there's nothing on my forehead. There's not a sign I'm wearing that says I'm a kid in care and now this person's trafficking me or I'm, a victim of human trafficking. We don't have any of those signs. So I say all that. So if you can explain what Change One is, how it got started and really what are the great things that you're doing there?
Thank you. Well, Change One exists to help children that are transitioning out of foster care. There is support on prevention, not enough. And there is support with children that are currently going through the foster care system. But there is not a lot of support for those that are transitioning into adulthood. And because I had personal experience with not having my basic needs and not having a caring adult in my life to be able to help in those areas, I did develop Change One. And let me back up and say that I did had several caring adults because of the fact that I was resilient and I knew that closed mouths do not get fed. And so I was not scared of asking for help from past family members or friends or acquaintances. But not every young person is like me. Not every young person is going to be bold enough to say, I'm hungry.
Right.
Not every young person is going to be bold enough to say, I haven't taken a bath in 3 days and I need to take a bath, because of the shame and the embarrassment. And so I wanted to clarify that is, yes, a caring adult was not identified before I emancipated out, but I did have a community to surround me because I fought for that community. I sought out that community. But not every kid has that opportunity. And that's why I created Change One so that we could be there to support them. But I can't do that on my own without the support of the community. And so a couple things that we do at Change One is most of people know us by our Thanksgiving celebration. Because there's an overrepresentation of children of color in foster care and there is a shortage of foster parents, most children end up in homes that do not look like them. And so during the holiday time, then sometimes they're not able to practice some of the same traditions that they're used to. And most people, we're all big about traditions, and a lot of people support Christmas. But no one really thinks about Thanksgiving and how it's so hard for that child to think about what to be thankful for, especially if they're separated from their siblings or their parents. It could be a very hard time for them. So I wanted kids to know that if you don't have a seat at anyone's table, you have a seat at Change One's table and that you're always welcome. And so we make sure that the things that they're traditionally used to eating, the things that they're traditionally used to doing, that we incorporate that every year. We have youth that are in care and also youth that have emancipated out of the foster care system come to the event. So youth in care can understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel through alumni that are at the event. And we have done it for 7 years now, and it's because of the community pouring into our agency. It's how we can show love and love on those young kids. And so Change One is about helping where there's gaps. Yeah. And so we saw that gap. And so we've met that gap and we will continue to keep meeting that gap. We also do a foster care awareness event in the month of May because that's Foster Care Awareness Month. And we're really big on educating our community about why do kids enter care, what happens to them while they're in care, and ultimately what happens later. And we always do a call to action every May. And so we're really big on educating. And then the other thing that we're really big on is advocacy. We want to mobilize our young people and we want their voices to count and we want them to know that they can be a part of change. And so we help young people to understand, what is policy, what is legislation, and how can your personal lived experience impact policy and legislation so that it can be a better system for other people that are going to come after you or your current peers. And so we're all about leadership and development. And we need the community support to continue to help develop young people and their character and their leadership skills and their advocacy skills. And it's just been a blessing to see young people grow and to invest in young people. And so I ask that people invest in Change One so we can invest in young people so that we can continue to keep doing this good work and fighting the good fight. And we are getting ready to start our college prep program as well. A lot of times when kids go off to college, they have, their parents, helping them set up their dorm room. And kids in foster care don't have that. Sometimes they don't even have the belongings to even put in a dorm room. Right. And, during Christmas break and spring break, the dorms are closed. So many of them are trying to figure out, well, where am I going to stay? And so, Change One is there to help them try to figure out, what am I going to do when times get tough? Right. And we've had young people that have participated in our advocacy work and our Thanksgiving events, and they come to us and say, "Hey, Cortney, I'm hungry, and I don't even know how to grocery shop." And that's what we do. We take them grocery shopping. We teach them how to read labels. We teach them how to make meals stretch. We're there, and we're just a call away. Yeah. We're a call away. But the only way that we can be a call away is if the community pours into us. Because a lot of times these young people, they don't meet eligibility requirements to receive governmental assistance or to receive assistance through Child Protective Services because they've reached a certain age. So we try to, again, fill in the gap and to help young people that are not eligible for already existing services. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I think the part that I'd love to piggyback off of is, with all of these government entities, there's always going to be cracks. Because like we said, completely outnumbered, right? The capacity is it's just high, to keep it simple, right? And sometimes it is absolutely like, it comes to a point where it's almost out of your hands because it's just, you can't keep up with it, right? And so, Change One, filling those gaps, as you put it, is so essential because now we are supporting that child, that alumni, as you put it. We are preventing them for experiencing any of these things, right?
By providing their basic needs.
Yeah, going back to the basic needs. And, I had one individual in conversation before, they're like, "Oh, but foster kids, they get to go to school for free. They should just do that." I'm like, I know they should. However, right? Yeah. If anybody has raised or they've gone to university themselves or raised an individual in that season, there's so much work to be done. Yeah. There's so much paperwork. Yeah. They're missing things. You can have a 2-parent household and yet still not get all of your stuff together to prepare your kid to go to school, right? Yeah. Whether it's paid for or not paid for. Yeah. We know reading so many, people even hate going to the DMV because they say it's so complicated and difficult and so on and so forth. So the expectation is for this now young adult who hasn't been able to do any of these things or have any guidance to just make it all on their own, right? Yeah. And that's just, I think it's a absurd ask and an absurd expectation. Yeah. And so you all filling those gaps, like I said, it's essential with all the prevention that can, that obviously will take place, right? And one of the things of me asking Cortney to really talk about Change One is, a lot of the local and smaller nonprofits don't get the attention that they deserve, right? They just don't. Yeah. It's the big ones because the big ones can afford a lot more things, right? Yeah. And not saying that they don't have worth or that they don't still need things. However, why don't we keep it local? Right?
Yeah.
Why don't we keep it local? And for those of you that aren't from Austin, Texas, however, even if you're not, there's been a big push over the past like decade or so. Is like keep it local. That's why we have Small Business Saturday, and so let's like keep it local. Buy on Etsy. So do all. So it's the same concept.
Yeah.
But from the for-profit, you're moving it over to the nonprofit with these social issues, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, look at all the great work and look at how much more we could do if more of the community poured in. Because that's one of the things when I talk about human trafficking, I'm like, okay, if your heart is for the homeless, or if your heart and purpose is for kids in care, or for all of these other areas, let me show you the correlation, because you're doing so much more than you actually know. Yeah. And if you're trained in human trafficking, then the children or the young adults you touch, you can actually prevent them from being prey, right? Like plain and simple. So
yeah, and just to kind of hit on that with, supporting the local and supporting like the small nonprofits, it's so important, because I started Change One in 2013, and I didn't get my 501c3 until 2017. So from 13 to 17, it was really the community supporting me. And it was, me paying out of my own pocket to make this happen. Yeah. And when I say Change One, what I'm meaning is me. And and so, I am trying to, continuously find, operational funds so that I can expand, because I am only one person. Right. And so I want to be able to hire other foster care alumni to do these trainings and to, help with the different programming that, Change One is offering. And I'm so thankful to my volunteers, and I will always welcome volunteers. But we gotta expand our program beyond me. Right. And so it is so important to pour into local small nonprofits, especially those with people with lived experience, because we're just trying to pave the way, and we're trying to make a difference in a true, authentic, and transparent way.
Oh, I love that. Because that's a, I say it all the time, and especially, like in May when it's Foster Care Awareness, January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I tell people, you're going to be flooded. You're going to see human trafficking all over the place, but you got to find the ones that are transparent and authentic. Ask those questions. If they're not willing to tell you, then move on to another nonprofit that is willing to do so. Because to me, that is their first job, right? To make sure that they are doing that, so that you can ask questions and know that the care that they're receiving is what you're signing up for. Yeah. As well as if your values align with that nonprofit. Yeah. Because we know sometimes things happen in regards to care that my values just do not align with. Right. So I can't support it fully, but I can find another one that is. And then there's always the ones that are shady, and they don't, we know they don't use funds appropriately, period. Right. So for sure, ask the questions and let people be transparent and authentic. And I love that. To you, that's a big piece. It's
a big piece. And I think that also what's different about Change One and other nonprofits is that we're not a 9 to 5. If a young person calls us at 10 o'clock at night and says, we're hungry, we're not going to say go to the food pantry when they open up at 9 o'clock. We're going to figure out how to get you some food that night. Yeah. And then we're going to figure out how to create a plan, a sustainable plan where you can continue to have the nourishment in your body. I had a young man, he called and said, my dorm hadn't been paid for. It's Thanksgiving. They're closing the dorm at 3 o'clock. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself and my belongings. We figured out a way how to get him to a safe space with his belongings, and most of the time, institutions, it's the holidays. People are gone doing their own thing. People are taking vacations. And Change One, we're only a call away is what I always say. We're a call away. I had another young man. He was at a Shell gas station, just standing there, not knowing where to go. He had been on the streets for a day before he called me. And we found a place for him to go, and we paid for a ticket for him to, drive to get a ride all the way from Houston to Dallas. And it was 9:00 at night. Most nonprofits, they're open between 9 and 5. And I tried to call several nonprofits in the Houston area to help him. And they got back to me on Monday morning. We're only a call away. We're trying to help people when they're in need.
People, do you hear that? Do you hear the distinction? And I say that with a smile because it really just warms, my heart to know that they know there is somewhere to go. And those are only the ones that know of Change One, right? And what Cortney is doing. There are thousands that don't know and that aren't in the local area, right, to say the least. So she is doing something at Change One that obviously we know is a need, but it's also out of the norm because that actually, I think that's the first. I know that you're a call away, and I know that people have called you at all hours because see, some of my clients are like in England and, like Abu Dhabi. So sometimes I have to be up really late and Cortney's still up. And I'm just like, how is she still up? She's got 2 children, school-age children. Like, what is she doing? Well, I know what she's doing. It's these kinds of calls. But I don't think you ever, like I said, just made that connection that most are open 9 to 5, factual. And you all, it doesn't matter what time they call, you are going to get them. Then you're going to meet the needs that they have because if you're listening, people, that's what these are. Their needs. They're not asking for something that is luxury or a want. They're just asking for a need.
Food, shelter. That's what they need, and especially during COVID. Especially during this time, they need it more than ever. Those kids that have been in college and now dorms are closed, they're needing somewhere to stay. Those that are in college, yes, their tuition is paid for. But I had one young man, he was working off of his cell phone during the semester. He needed a laptop. These just basic needs. Right. And we're one call away. And I tell people, our slogan is change one mind, change one life, help change a forgotten child's life. It is so important not to forget them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, or at least on every episode, we always have a call to action. And our call to actions are small because they're doable and it's consistent and it helps people say, okay, I can help and I can do that. Now, when Cortney and I talked last time, I was like, hey, what is one of the, the call to action? And she just has so many in the sense of, like she mentioned, right? She needs the community to really like pour in, right? Because she can't keep doing it on her own. And we should have more foster care youth come in and partake in this because they are setting that pathway, right, for the others who are coming behind them. And so we talked about all these other things that she is doing, like on the prevention side, on the training and curricula and all these things that are total worthy of call to action. Okay. But because of COVID, and I'm sure some of you know that a lot of these young people that are in having these social issues, right? These are a social problem, a community problem. COVID is just kicking butt. Like everything's closed. They can't get things they normally can. You're talking about services to even get on the phone with anybody. If anybody answers is like through the roof, right? Like they cannot get the services that they normally could. Can't qualify for unemployment, can't qualify for all these things. So your call to action for this episode is to get some of these basic needs met for these kids, that are experiencing troubles in COVID. Again, basic needs. She just gave you that example. So we have a place And we're going to do this February 6th, right? We said it's going to be Saturday, February 6th. And she's going to give you a list, and we're going to have it posted for sure of what these needs, or what needs, right? And we're going to list them. We're going to ask you to drop them off down in South Austin for those of you that are here local. Anybody who is, throughout the state and wants to send something as well, please contact us. We'll tell you where to send it, because we know we have people that have huge hearts all over the state of Texas, all over the nation. And who knows, it's something that you could actually possibly talk to Cortney about, where you could duplicate it in your own area in another state, right? Because she knows there's a need. Yes. And she's got this down. She just needs more help, right? And so I think that this is our first step as a community, is to really show these kids and to prevent them from being trafficked. We're going to meet their basic needs. I feel it's the community's job. It's not even the government's job to meet their needs. It's the community's job to meet those needs, to guide them, so that then they are able one day to sustain themselves.
Yes.
And what it sounds like, all the kids that you're working with, I mean, they just want to be able to sustain themselves. Yeah, they don't even want people to constantly give, right? Eventually they want to be able to have a job. They want to be able to buy things on their own and things like that. So it's not like they're just...
Yeah, it's not like they're like wanting to live off the system. They're wanting to reach self-sufficiency, but they just need a little guidance. They need a little support, and just someone to show that they care. Yeah. And I can most definitely say I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for people investing in me. Sure. I remember one time I was in college and I didn't have no food. And I remember one of my old case managers, she drove all the way from Dallas all the way to Arlington to pick some food up for me, and drove it all the way to Commerce, Texas.
Really?
Just so that I can have some food.
Yeah.
And I'm in my 30s now, and I will always forever remember her for doing that for me. Right. That one simple thing. Mm-hmm.
That one simple thing, like we said, may be small for the community, but so big, a huge impact for the kids in care.
Yes.
So could you tell us in about 30 seconds, what are some of those needs that we're going to list them. So you're going to see them, but I just want you to hear from Cortney. And like she said, transparent and authentic, or is it authentic and transparent?
Transparent and authentic.
Transparent and authentic. So she'll tell you where these are going. Her and I kind of talked about this before. So Cortney would tell you hey, this is what you gave, this is how it helped, right? And things of that nature. So what are some of those things that you say these kids, I keep calling them kids and I'm so sorry, these young people need?
So the young people are needing clothes. It's cold right now. They're needing jackets. They're also needing interview clothes. Clothes are just so important and so vital. They're needing food. Sometimes canned goods are great, but sometimes they're going to need protein in their life. So they're going to need vegetables in their life. And so we're going to need support in that area of being able to get them nutritious food from the grocery store. They're also in need of, supporting them with their housing, their rent, their car payments, those different type of things. Right now, they're needing help for those that are not able to maintain on their own. So those are just a couple of things that they're needing. I would also say toiletries, basic hygiene products. They're in need. And the young people that I'm working with, they would be so great. They would be so thankful for it. And many of them are young adults and they're just now trying to start out on their own. So some of them are needing a couch or even a bed or a box spring. These are things that will set them up for success.
And I appreciate you sharing that, Cortney, because I think sometimes when people are hearing the list, they're like, okay, food, okay, clothes, I could do that. But I know so many people that are on Marketplace, all day, every day, Facebook Marketplace, right? It's you can find things that are so inexpensive. And I don't know if used things are okay. I know some nonprofits are not, and they prefer all like tagged brand new things. So if you could just clarify that for everybody so that we just know.
Yeah. Well, due to COVID, I think it would be best that we refrain from getting used things.
Fair enough. Right. Fair enough. And so, so these are some of the things that she needs, right? And when she is talking, or when you're talking about like rent or car payment or what have you, again, we're able to show these individuals that it did go to rent. It did go to the car payment. And so you'll be able to facilitate that in that kind of conversation. Correct?
We'll have success stories posted on our website for the donations that come in. We will also be able to provide, tax information for those that want to make, donations and need that tax information, because we are a 501c3. But yes, we will show a report of what has happened with your donations and how it's impacting the children and young adults that go through our program.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Because I really think that is so important when we're here at the Inhumane podcast, we are literally showing you organizations that we've worked with in some capacity, and that there is trust and, vetting, right? Because we know we are becoming smarter consumers and want to know where our money is going. And we have nonprofits or people that are telling us, hey, this is where it's going, and I can prove that to be the case, right? And I think it's important while we're building trust from both sides, because we want this to be an ongoing thing. We know that people are charitable. Even in these hard times, we know that people are still willing to give. Even if they're getting unemployment, they're still willing to give something from that unemployment. I know individuals like that. Like it may seem like that's off base, but it's so true. So again, this is going to be February 6th. We'll post the time, and it's at Christian Life Austin Church. It's off of Westgate and across from the Central Market right there. So it's South Austin. We're going to give a lot of information. Again, if you're listening throughout the state, you want to give, you can also just contact Change One as well. DM Inhumane podcast. We could also help filter that over to Cortney. But all is accepted. As you mentioned, these kids couldn't be, these youth, these young adults couldn't be any more thankful. And so go ahead.
And if you want to learn more about Change One, you can go to www.change1.org and check us out.
And we'll have her stuff up as well for those of you that are audio listeners. We'll have Cortney's stuff up for Change One. And again, this is not the last time you're going to hear from Cortney. We haven't even scratched the surface. So you will be back.
Yes.
Correct, right? Yes, she'll be back, and we'll tell you all the other great things that Change One is doing in specifics, because again, this is a huge prevention for human trafficking. Okay, we are literally going to be able to take care of both things that are major impacting our community severely. Like, this is a disease that there is a cure for it. And with our kids in care, we have to start paying attention to them first and foremost, because they are the largest demographic that are preyed upon for these traffickers. So I want to thank you again, Cortney, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. That chair is let's just go ahead and put your name on that chair. And then when someone else comes, we'll just give them another chair. So this is Cortney's chair. She definitely will be back. And we want to thank you all again for tuning in. Again, it is January, National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So wear your blue, pop on those X's for the End It movement, because we are all abolitionists ready to eradicate human trafficking. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. You can find more episodes and all other Hot Pie Media originals baked fresh daily at our home on the web at hotpiemedia.com, the Hot Pie Media YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts.